Okay, so I think we're good. Okay, so let's officially start. So I know some of you are already in the chat. Let me actually open this up so I can see you all. Hi, Joy. Hi, Dorette Murray. Hi, Betty. Hi, Louisa. Hi, April. Hi, Joy and Angie and Rita. You guys are the first ones in, and Carol. Thank you guys for joining us. Of course, we've been talking about interviewing Paul forever. For the last few months, we've been saying, we've got to get you on, because we all watched the documentary last year, and then we got the book, and we were able to read up on everything in depth. And I'm just going to say, it's chock full of all the things that he did. It's actually almost overwhelming when you have it all in one place like this. And so just before we start with the questions and the stories, Paul, I just wanted to tell you. Oh,
sorry.
Okay. I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciated your tweet from earlier this week. I know we put out a post to our Twitter, and then you said one of your tweets was, "My one hope and mission is when my children and grandchildren Google Michael Jackson, they see his humanitarian efforts and his music, not the crap that comes up, at the moment. Together, we can reaffirm Michael Jackson's legacy." And I thought that was so powerful. And I just wanted to ask you really quick about kind of your starting point with the book. Did you, because this all happened before even the movie that came out, the whole book. People from different countries were asking you for a copy, and I mean, you only had a couple of private copies at first, right? So how did that all start?
So where does it start? Geez, so probably starts, I run a Michael Jackson Australia fan group and page as well, and I've been doing that since just after he came here for history, I think it was. So I've been doing that for many, many years, and in 2009 I went over to Michael's memorial in LA and flew back here and started documenting all Michael's visits to Australia on a website, which was michaeljacksonaustralia.com. Which has since been taken over by the estate. But anyway, so I started researching all of Michael's movements to Australia from 1975 and 85 and 88 and 96. And I started finding all the hospitals he visits and all the people that he, contacted and helped, but none of it was in the mainstream media. And I started finding more and more. The deeper I dug, I found more and more. So while I was putting my website together about Michael Jackson's visits to Australia, I was also documenting on the side all the good stuff he did. And then that just got so humongous, the amount of information, the amount of visits, the amount of people that he helped. That just sort of took on a life of its own. So I finished my website on the visits to Australia, and then I kept looking deeper into all the good things he did. And then I started looking way back to the 70s, and then created a timeline. And I said to myself, well, why isn't all this out there on the front pages when there's so much crap on the front pages? So I just thought, I've got to do something. Let me put it all together. I didn't know what. I thought maybe I'll do a website. And I just eventually just had enough information to put it all in one big book. And I just did it for myself at first. And then people asking for copies. And so I published it. And then it's gone all around the world, America and Europe and
well, it's wonderful
Australia.
to have all of them in one book, all the stories there.
Yeah, because I'm a big collector of Michael Jackson stuff, as you can probably see. And I've got lots of books, but I didn't see any that concentrated purely on his humanitarianisms. And I thought that's a massive part, if not a bigger part of him than his music. It's a massive part, and I just thought it's something to be celebrated and spoken about. And as you mentioned in that tweet, when my kids and grandkids Google Michael Jackson, I want them to see the real Michael Jackson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did more hospital visits than concerts. right? Or every time he went to a on world tour into the cities, he would go to the hospitals and spend time, and not only just donate charity, he would spend time with them, and that's not what you see other celebrities doing. To give them his time, and and hold their hand.
Hours and hours. Yeah.
And not only did he spend time with them, he would follow up with them for years, sometimes the entire rest of their lives. He would keep following up with them and paying for their bills or, whatever they needed. That was the most amazing thing for me. Well, before we get into the questions, I just wanted to share my favorite story in the book. So this is from March 3rd, 1995 on page 76. And this is the picture of him. I don't know if you guys can see it. Okay. He's, yeah. So that story that shook me to the core. It was about a mother who threw her 2 children over a bridge and tried to throw herself over the bridge to commit suicide. The youngest child died. The older child lived. And, Michael paid for the funeral services for the younger child that passed away. And, just seeing him, and I think this was at the funeral service, he's standing there, and I don't know if you can see his expression and his stance and his body language here. He's such in protective mode, kind of like a guardian. And that picture really stood out to me. I mean, there's so many pictures in here that I've seen before, but I never knew the full story behind them, or I knew like little things here and there, but just being able to put everything into context is really amazing. And I hope that you guys can see this picture. He's just very stoic, very serious, and it's just, that was him. He was a protector of children, Really
and there's many more stories as well, and I've got to say, not everything's in the book. There's so many more stories that I read about, and after I first published the book in 2018, I got contacted by a lot of people with their own stories, and there's more stories, but if I couldn't verify them with either photos or an official source, I didn't put them in there, just because I wanted it to be factual, I wanted it to be real. But there was many more stories, very touching stuff.
Wow. Well,
this will share my favorite story too after when you're done.
Oh, you can go. You can go, Tammy. Go ahead. Yeah, share your favorite. Paul can go. He can go after you. I want to hear.
Yeah. So I think it's the my favorite story would be Christine Dowling from Ireland, and she couldn't walk, or she could barely get out of bed, and and she was flown out to see Michael's concert, and then I posted it before, but basically he held her hand, and she hadn't felt her arm in years, and she felt tingles, and then she was able to use her arm, and I know you've met her, right, Paul?
I haven't met her. I've spoken to her.
Spoke with her, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like she planted a tree after he passed away in Ireland, and but it's just you hear so many stories that people are affected like for the rest of their lives. Either they got better, or they were cured, or and I'm not saying he's curing, but kind of is like he kind of does affect them profoundly, and their arm, she was able to use her arm again. So all I know is that the experience was just with them forever, and physically changed her too. So did she say anything to you about that? Like does it still with her? Is she still affected by him to this day?
Yeah, definitely. So she's still a very big fan, a very big protector of his legacy. She's on Twitter. So she reached out to me after I first published my book, and because I was making the documentary, and I said, if there's anyone out there with stories, I want to speak to you. And so when I was making my documentary, I was trying to get an interview with her, but because I'm in Australia, she's in Ireland, I couldn't really fly over, although I thought about it. And so we were trying to set up some cameras with her and a couple of friends so we could do an interview, but it never happened. But ever since then, we've remained friends, and we've spoken a fair bit. And she's still a very big fan and a big protector. And she told me that story, and it's pretty touching. It's one of my favorites as well.
And it's true story. That's amazing. That, you know,
Yeah.
fix her arm that way by just his energy or whatever it was. I don't know.
And there's quite a few stories like that.
There are.
And I think Tiffany Rao was one that he met in the 80s, the late 80s. She's in the documentary and the stories in the book. And she said, my favorite quote was, there is strength in hope.
Yeah.
And giving the gift of hope to someone who hasn't got any is just so powerful. And that is a reoccurring theme for all the kids that he helped and gave the gift of hope to.
Yeah.
You know, it's unbelievable.
You see it over and over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what was your favorite story? I don't know if you can even choose a story, but
choose.
Look, there's a few. Christina was one of them. There's one. There's a story he was on the history tour in South Africa, and one of his photographers tells this story in one of his books. But so Michael and the photographer were walking through a hospital with his entourage, a couple of bodyguards, and they came across an isolation ward where there was a little, I think he was 3 or 4 year old child in there by himself. He'd been isolated with an unknown disease. And Michael said, how come he's in there by himself? And the doctor said, well, we don't know what's wrong with him. We don't know what disease he's got. It could be contagious. He's got to be isolated. And so Michael said, okay. And they walked a couple of steps. And then Michael ran back into the room and held this baby. And all the doctors and nurses and entourage were like, we can't go in there. What are you doing? What are you doing? And so Michael gave the kid a hug and they embraced. And then he came back out and everyone said, what are you doing? This child has a disease. You're putting yourself at risk. And Michael said, I'm doing what any mother or parent would do. And that child needs to be held and embraced. And that's what I did.
Oh,
and it was just what he did. It was second nature.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't think twice about it. So that is a great one.
Wow.
There's a lot of stories. I think he always surprised people, like dignitaries and official people, doctors that were around him. There was a story in your book where, I don't know, this kid tripped and he was surrounded by his entourage, cameramen, everyone, but the kid tripped and he ran over and just picked up this child. That's just who he was.
Yeah.
And it's just really beautiful to be able to read all of that in detail. So I think everyone here is just saying, oh, you're my hero, Paul, because this was a lot of work, and we're going to get into kind of how you did this. But I just first wanted to say that we really appreciate the fact that you did this research and took your book all the way back to 1971.
Mm-hmm.
I think we know as fans that Michael Jackson had these humanitarian ideals at a young age, but I don't think a lot of people know that that's kind of where it started. And, even when you look at his songs from that time period, the early 80s, a lot of them have humanitarian themes, Be Not Always, Can You Feel It? Those are the ones that come to mind. And those aren't the ones that we always think about when we think of like humanitarian Michael. We think of Earth Song, and they don't really care about us, like the later things, but it really did start early for him.
Oh, and even as a child, he's like what, 5, 6, 7 years old. When he would get his allowance, he would go and buy candy for the kids. He's been giving to children when he was a child. So this is nothing new. And people who are not fans might think that, oh, he likes to be around children, but this is when he was a little kid too, and he was a teenager, and he was just elementary school. He's always been that way.
Forever.
Yeah.
So we'll
I think everyone's born with a purpose, and it's plain to see that Michael Jackson's purpose from the time he was born was to have this amazing effect on the world and what he did for the world, and he achieved it.
Mm-hmm.
He really exceeded. Yeah. Well, all right. So I guess we can get right into the questions now. We have a few for you. I hope you're up for that. So the first thing, and we touched on this a little bit, can you describe the process of collecting the interviews, the newspaper stories? I mean, this must have been hours of research, and not all of this stuff is online. You actually followed up on some of your stories. Like you would find one little boy or little girl that Michael impacted, but then you also had updates on, you know, what happened to them 5 years down the line. Did you actually speak to them? It sounded like that in a lot of the stories. Actually personally spoke to them.
I did speak to a lot of people, mostly via Twitter and Facebook, because being in Australia, I'm a little bit isolated. There was only so many cases in Australia where he helped people. I spoke to a few of them, but so from people around the world, I pretty much spoke to via Twitter and Facebook, and hours it took me. It was about 2 years to put all this together. And I would pretty much do it at work sometimes, and then I'd come home and spend a couple of hours on it. And so it was a big process. It took a long time, and I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just compiling all this information for myself at first, but then it just got so much. I'm like, I've got to get it out there.
Yeah, I think that's how a lot of us fans start these initiatives and projects. We kind of start it for ourselves. Like this book club, you know, we wanted to learn more, and it sort of just grew into something that we didn't really imagine. So we're so glad that you did that.
That's amazing. Because that's what needs to be shared with the world, like your documentary and the humanitarians seeing all of it. And it's just so much. And it's like hospitals, all the children over the years, with so many visits, so much money. And to this day, and it's just like people, you just never hear about it. You don't in the media at all. So yeah, out there too, all this, you know. So for his birthday, we were excited to have sort of a theme about his humanitarian works and efforts, and so you were the perfect person for this day.
Absolutely.
For the stories.
Right.
Yes, and like Tammy said, just getting this information out into the public. I think your documentary from last year couldn't have come at a better time. We all know what happened last year. I'm not going to mention it, but I found so much comfort in watching that. And I just wanted to know, you know, what was the process for that? Because there was a lot of footage there. I know the book came first, the documentary came second. So what was, did you always envision putting together a visual version of this, or okay, it kind of came?
No, I didn't. So when I was researching for my book, obviously I was looking at newspaper articles, TV stories, news stories, videos. YouTube was a big information source for me. So I downloaded a lot of videos just for the book for my own research purposes. And I've got this 2 terabyte hard drive, which has got hours and hours and hours of all this footage. And I've said to my wife, if the house ever breaks, if the house ever catches fire, grab that hard drive and let's get out of here.
Yeah.
And then the kids.
Yeah.
But so no, I had all that footage already. And then once January of 2019, yeah, when the mockumentary came out, when that came out, I just went, my heart sank, and I'm like, oh, this is utter, I don't want to swear, but it's crap. And what can I do again? So then I'm like, all right, if they want a documentary, I'll give you a documentary. So again, got on my little Apple Mac, and again spent every day. I'd get home from work and I'd get straight on it until I went to bed, and just keep going and going and go. I've got to do something. And then I was finished around late May, I think it was. So I thought June would be the perfect time to try and get it out there and get as many people to see it as possible.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I already had that footage there.
The timing, like I said, was just perfect.
Yeah, you had it already prepared to.
Yeah, and again, it's
that mockumentary. See?
Yeah,
it was like a rebuttal.
It was, yeah, it really was.
And I didn't talk about any of that sort of stuff. I left that to square one, and again, this is purely about. Even in the book, I don't even talk about his musical legacy, and that's humongous. But this is purely about one thing, and that's the spiritual, the human being.
Yes.
Yeah, the musical legacy, we all know that stands on its own, but this is just, and so that actually leads to my next question. You know, if any of you have read this, um, it's just so powerful. And this is something that Jeanette was saying. It's very powerful to see pages and pages of his acts of kindness and his acts of service to children. It's almost overwhelming, and you see that his deeds really speak for themselves. Like you can see almost it's organized by month and by year, and with pictures, color pictures, and newspaper clippings, all sorts of things. And the crazy thing is, you will almost see an act of service, an act of kindness, like every month of every year. And you know, I was reading this book and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm still in the 80s. I'm still in the 80s.
How does he find the time?
Yes. And that's kind of like what contributes to, I've always felt like, you know, Michael Jackson was just everywhere all the time. And this was why, because he was just visiting hospitals, visiting all of these places to help children. And so for me, we wanted to know how you chose this particular format for this, because you didn't insert any of your own narrative. You were just stating facts. How did you make that decision?
Well, I'm a law student, so I'm all about facts. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
hear your opinions. Sometimes I do, but when I'm reading a book, I want facts. I don't want opinion. But I wanted to do it in the chronological form because I thought it was easy to read. You could pick it up on any page and just read it. And I wanted it to be able to be read by younger people, especially, because again, my motivation was my kids' generation and then my grandkids' generation and the next generation. You know, I wanted it to be easy to read and diary-like and factual. So it all just came together like that.
Did you say you're a law student?
Yes.
Oh, that's why trial binders and things like that. That's the way I operate too with everything, right?
Right.
Then you have it. Then you have your exhibit. Yeah, it's easy to understand. It's really good.
Yep.
Is. Okay, you're up, Tammy.
Well, yeah, I guess we touched on this already about Michael's humanitarian. He's been one pretty much his whole life, and you know where that came from, and whether you know he had a lot of influence from his mother and his being a Jehovah's Witness as a child, and service mission work, you know, on Sundays and that sort of thing, and he grew up believing that, yeah, like your charity is from your heart and it's not to be not for publicity. So he didn't have TV crews with him to do that. I mean, sometimes it happened, but so just wanted to know what do you think, were there other factors with that, or where do you think his kind heart and his humanitarian efforts came from after researching him and the specific
well, as I touched on before, I think he was a bit of an angel. I think, you know, we've all got a purpose in life, and his purpose was massive. And I can't explain it. I'm very into the spirituality of it, but I really feel like he was a bit of an angel. I hear stories of patients when he would touch them on the head, and he was so kind and gentle, but they would feel a warmth rush through their body. Yeah. And then, you know, so many stories of kids visiting Neverland, and then their sickness or disease would go, and they'd go and see the doctors, and the doctors would say, we can't explain this, but you're okay, you're cured. So again, as you said before, I don't want to say he could cure, but he pretty much could, and there's power in hope and the spirituality.
Yeah, I think that you could write another book just based on that, like all the people. I know you touched on it in your book, but wow, there are so many stories. And even there was Taj and with Square, when they did a tour, and I saw them, they were on a sort of talk show, and there was this girl there in the audience saying, I don't know where they were exactly, but came up and she was like, oh, you know, like he saved my life, and another person who got a liver, you know, and things that we know of a couple patients, you know, Farkas and some other people that received some help from him, but he actually saved people. He really did, and supported them for their lives sometimes. And so out of those people that you have stories then that people were affected and they were cured or whatever. Do you know, like, were there any stories that you missed? I know you were just talking about the one there that in the hospital, but were there any that you wanted to share that was pretty amazing? That
Well, there's quite a few of kids with cancer, because, you know, when they visited Neverland, they used to come in 100 packs of kids and their parents and the staff. And we only have heard a couple of stories from those kids. Some get better, some don't.
right.
Some, that visit and that hope extends their time by months, maybe years. But a lot of these happened in the 80s and 90s. So even if they've extended their time, a lot of them may not be around just because it was, 40, 50 years ago. But there is other stories, and there was one, funnily enough, that I couldn't find the source of, but it was a comment, and I put it in the 2020 revised version. It wasn't in the first one, but it was a woman she went by the name of Swiftheart, and she commented on a blog on Oprah.com, funnily enough, which has now been taken down. But she spoke about being a cancer patient and going to Neverland and coming home and then going to the doctors and being told her cancer was gone and they couldn't explain it. And I think there's many, many stories like that out there. There's a lot of stories that aren't out there, that are private. But the amount of kids that went to Neverland and tell of these stories, there's got to be more out there that we don't know about. And this all happened before social media.
Right. And that's the thing, like all the kids that visited Neverland primarily were sick children, and Make-A-Wish Foundation, and in that lady you were speaking with, I can't remember her name right now, that she works for Make-A-Wish, the one that she had the dance with Michael, and she, and you gave her that hope. You quoted her. She worked for Make-A-Wish after, yes. And so that's what it was. It was about children escapism, and getting away from their sickness for a day and playing, and that's what he was all about. And that's they twisted the narrative, of course, to why children come to Neverland, but that's what it was about. It was underprivileged children who may not be able to see the ocean and animals, and then also I guess you mentioned that as a child he would write letters to these sick children. I mean, there was there's in between song recordings, and during school, young Michael as a child would find time to write letters to sick children in hospitals. Do you know if any of those letters are preserved, or have you ever seen any of these letters?
I've seen a couple. I don't think they're in the book. They're probably out there on the World Wide Web. I've seen a couple. And again, it's hard because in the early 80s and 90s, there was no internet. People couldn't upload their things to Pinterest or YouTube. And so you have to dig deep to find some of this stuff. Yeah. And also on the subject of hospitals, they're not like they are now with clowns that come in and brighten up kids. They didn't know back in the 80s and 90s how much power there was in a clown coming into the hospital. And the story is based on Robin Williams' Patch Adams, how they found in the 80s and 90s that they were providing hope for these kids, made them live longer and helped their illnesses, and the spirituality of it. They didn't know back then. So that the hospitals were a bit different back then. They were a dark, sad, gloomy sort of place. Now you've got kids' wards with, big paintings on the wall, lots of colour, and some even have zoos in these hospitals. And
oh, wow.
They do a lot more now. But back then it wasn't like that. They were all very doom and gloom and a bit sad. So to be able to give these kids hope and something to smile about and look forward to. And a big thing Michael used to do was when he visited these patients was give them something to hold on to. Like he'd say, look, I'm coming back in a few years. Hold off and I'll come and see you again. Or, my concert is in a couple of months. Hold off and come. And they would hold off, and they would be strong and fight because they had something to fight for. And that's just powerful, so powerful.
Oh, I'm getting emotional.
I know,
Um,
so I'm right.
Yeah.
no, it's really hard to talk about this sometimes. And, everyone here in the chat definitely agrees with your theory of, the earth angel, he was a healer, protector. I see it,
Mhm.
sorry, that's what I believe. And he was definitely a force of nature, and there's really no one like him. And he was always ahead of the curve. Like what you said about the Patch Adams, clowns and the happiness in hospitals. He was just doing that naturally. It was just like instinctual to him. And now it's like a big thing. And so that actually leads to our next question. Um, so you touched on the Oxford speech and some of his other speeches in the book, but I noticed in 2000 and in 2001, Michael kind of makes a very significant shift in his approach to charity work. So he goes from doing like individual acts of service to like kids in different countries to actually trying to create like an initiative that would heal the source of childhood trauma, pain, and suffering by, hoping to strengthen the family structure and the home life of children. And I always just thought that, I think a lot of people, I don't think people really heard his message when he made that speech, because he said a lot of really critical things. And this was back when he met Rabbi Shmuley, as we know, and this was the Heal the Kids Foundation. What do you think inspired him to take more of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a whole approach, like a holistic approach, I guess, to charity work?
I think in some regards, I think he saw it as being proactive as regard instead of reactive. So he spent, decades traveling the world, seeing so many horrible things, abuse victims, and so instead of trying to react to that and help the abuse victims, how do we be proactive and stop that abuse? And for the next generation, he talked about parents, read to your kids at night, sit down at dinner time around the table, turn the TV off. All these simple things that is more proactive in family abuse and neglect, and which breeds some of the problems that he was tackling. So I think it was more of a proactive approach of the next generation will be better because the parents, he was trying to teach the next generation how to look after their kids and be more proactive than reactive to abuse, I believe.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And yeah, I think some people agree. Mona says it's so interesting that at first glance seems to be all about the heart and the compassion, but he's also really smart, in taking that proactive approach. So Jeanette actually had this question here, our next question here. It's really interesting because Michael grew up in a very specific time period. This was post-civil rights era in America, and there are actually a lot of positive artistic influences like Marvin Gaye singing What's Going On. He loved Three Dog Night, and their music is also peace focused. And we just wanted to know also, do you think that any of that, just being around those kinds of artists growing up, do you think that also had an impact on him? Because he's surrounded by the Motown world, and he was just in such a unique position. He actually traveled and saw the world as a kid, and he saw all of these. I am a big proponent of studying abroad in education, and I think that it's such a treasure to see the world in that way and to see how other people live. And sometimes I just wonder if that really contributed as well.
For sure, I think definitely it would have. And the music industry, from what I can see, I used to write a lot for a music industry blog, was a lot different in the 70s and 80s to what it is now. It's very different. And Michael spoke about it being in the Motown family. It felt like a family, and they'd go to each other's houses. Yeah, as you said, traveling the world at a young age. I know my wife and I have a vision of one day taking our kids to Africa and Uganda. And I shared something in the book club group about the Heal the World Miracle Community Foundation, which I'm a big supporter of. And Happy's an amazing bloke. You've got to look this up. But we want to take the kids over there. And I think for a child to see other kids that aren't doing it so well, it makes them appreciate what they've got more, and hopefully makes them want to make the world a better place. I know it's cliche, but I think that's what it breeds.
And that's what he always said. Yeah. You'll have to
It's
tell
simple.
us. Yeah, you'll have to tell us more about that initiative the global initiative that you're part of. We'll post it again. I want to learn more.
Yeah. I know they're taking on, there's a new initiative they've started today, the Heal the World Miracle Foundation. And I'll post some links. I'll share them with you later on.
Great.
Okay.
So there's a story at the end of your book that describes a teenage girl with rare bone cancer. I'm just reading my notes here. She was invited to Neverland by Michael, and he prayed over her. And when she returned home, her cancer healed. Have you tried to track down this person? Have you tried posting this story on social media to hopefully find her?
This was the one you mentioned from Oprah.com.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the
one
one.
of my. It's one of my favorite stories, and I tried so hard to track down this woman, and I couldn't. I put it out on Twitter and Facebook, and I went to the library trying to look up different things, but I couldn't, unfortunately.
On that note, do you plan on continuing reaching out to find other humanitarian stories? Is this an ongoing project for you? Are you going to continue to do this right now?
Look, I still run the humanitarian page, and if you follow that, you'll see that almost every day I'm saying, on this day, Michael did this, on this day, Michael did that, purely about the humanitarian. I'm not reaching out. I'm working on another project at the moment, which is a book about Michael. A bit different. Sorry.
I said, yay, we like books about Michael.
Yeah, it's very, very different to this one. But no, I'm still receiving messages from people with stories. I'm not going to revise the book again with more stories, I don't think. We'll see how many come through. Yeah, I'm working on something else that's very different. I'll be happy to share those stories on Twitter and my Facebook page and all that, for sure.
We're excited to know what your book's about when you're ready to share.
Yeah.
It might take a while.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. Well, I know for new books, you can't rush the process. No. But I wonder, because I know that Tom Mesereau was putting together, he was also collecting acts of kindness and stories on Michael. Do you know of any updates to that project?
No, and I was meant to email in this week to ask because when the estate put out the message, does anybody have anything? I replied and sent them the transcript to my book in digital form. And Tom got back to me personally and said, thank you, this is invaluable, this is so good. And then a couple of weeks later, emailed me again and said, just wanted you to know that I'm still working on this. I love what you've done here, and I've actually ordered a copy of the book. And I said, Tom, you didn't have to order it. I would have sent you a copy, but okay. So I will touch base with him again this week and just see what's going on there. Well, I'm not sure what that was about, but
yeah,
now that I've got the communication tunnel open with Tom, I'll use it and ask him.
Yeah, I wonder what inspired him to come up with something like that, because I remember he kind of, I don't know if it was a letter. It was a letter, official letter that he put out, and I was like, wow, this guy. I don't know what he has planned, so that's exciting.
I love Tom.
Yeah,
and then his heart is in the right place.
Mm-hmm. And then also, I know that Taj's documentary is on hold right now because of the pandemic, but I wonder, I mean, it would be great. He said that he wants to focus on the humanitarian side of Michael as well. I mean, I would hope that he would reach out to you and use the stories in your book as a guide. He's talked about interviewing people and flying out to get these stories, but a lot of them are here, and there's more, I guess. But I mean,
well, Taj has the book. I have spoken to Taj, and just via Twitter, and I sent him a copy of the book, and he loves it. So that's in his. I think he's steering away from the humanitarian side, but he's got my details, and we've spoken.
Yeah, I know the project shifted a little bit in the past year. Okay, well, I just wanted to say this one last thing. As I read your book, it was really, I was amazed because I didn't realize how much Michael touched my life in ways that I didn't even realize. I didn't know that he helped raise funds to build the 1972 Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change, which is in Atlanta, Georgia. I just visited it 2 years ago. I had no idea he had a hand in that. I had no idea he was on the board of directors of DARE, the Drug Abuse Resistance Education Program, which is in every American school, and I was in the program when I was in elementary school. I didn't know that. And so it just makes me sad because I know a lot of people don't know these things. And I'm wondering, what do you think it would take to make Michael's humanitarian acts more publicly recognized and more known?
I wish I knew. I wish I knew. The book, as I said, my Facebook, and I've got a different Facebook and Twitter for myself, my personal, and I've got one purely for the humanitarian book and documentary that I update almost daily, just trying to get more information out there about all the good things he did. And that's all I can do. I don't know. I would like to see more people sharing and talking about it. I know the Michael Jackson fan community can get, quite passionate about certain things, and they like to share and opinionate on certain things. But Michael said it best when he said, don't read it, don't look at it, don't share it, put it to the side, because every time you click on something, it gives it growth and it grows and grows. So click on the good news, click on the stuff that we know Michael was passionate about, and share that. And don't, when you get passionate about some of those bad stories, maybe we can just hold back and ignore it.
Yeah, we put a lot of energy into trying to combat the negativity when it's something that we struggle with too. And I struggle with it, and I try to put more energy into the positive because that's what I want to get promoted. And so I think you make a really valid point there. I
think it's healthy for us too.
Do you know, I just thought of this. Michael's school, where he went to elementary school in grade 6 there, and they named the name of the school was Michael Jackson, whatever school, right. Or the auditorium there, the auditorium, right? And they had taken down his name around the 2003 allegations, I believe. And I think they put it back up, but I'm wondering, is it still up now since that mockumentary last year? I didn't check.
I believe it is.
Is it? I hope so, because that just drives me crazy. When they took it down in 2003, it's like, or 5 or whatever it was just, it's just like a sword in your gut.
And a couple of radio stations tried taking his music off.
I know, and
I think it lasted a couple of weeks before he had to be back. You can't run a radio station and not play Michael Jackson. You just can't do it.
And that's the thing. After I rewatched I watched your documentary a couple times, and I rewatched it again last night, and I read the book again, and you just, all of this goodness that comes out of both of the book and the documentary, and all of his good deeds, and then it's so infuriating that people have a different idea about him and what they think he was, but they don't know. And it's just, like there's this psychiatrist on my Facebook that said, what is I don't know, he's just putting out there, what is something that you're just tired of telling people, it's just a random thing, doesn't have to be anything with the COVID, right? I'm like the only one, because there's all these smart answers, they're all a bunch of psychiatrists or whatever. I'm like, Michael Jackson was not a pedophile. It's just like, were you sick of telling people he was a good person, and he was a humanitarian. That's what he was. That's
Yeah.
that was his fundamental
Yeah,
life.
I almost wish that more of this stuff was televised. I know that he didn't want it, and I know that if he had televised it, people would have been like, "Oh, this is just a photo op for Michael Jackson. He's just trying to do this." But I almost wish that more of it had been documented and shown, because I think it really would have changed people's perception of him. I think a lot of people know that he did do some of this stuff, a little bit of it, but not to this degree at
Mm-hmm.
all. And it's sad to me that, if you hadn't written this, a lot of these stories still would have been out there, just scattered.
Yeah, all scattered. Yeah.
And at least,
Yeah, and I might not revise the book, but once we're allowed to travel again, I would love to do the documentary I had to do quite fast. I heard about the mockumentary and I'm like, I want to get something out quick to rebut that.
you did.
But I won't revise the book, but I would love to do a proper documentary where I come over to the States and interview people and get my camera and lights out and go to England and travel around and get real face-to-face interviews. And that's something I would really like to do and make a proper documentary about it once we can travel again.
Yeah.
I was meant to be over there in the US between June and August. We were doing a big road trip, from Forest Lawn to the musical.
I think we all had those plans. Yeah, I was supposed to do Vegas and New York, the musical in New York, and then MJ1 in Vegas, and yeah.
MJ1 is still happening, right? MJ1, it's still on right now.
I think they're reopening in September,
Okay.
I think, but they were closed. I was gonna go for this. I was supposed to be there today, but it's not open anymore, not yet. And just as a side note, everyone, there were quite a few people, Amy, Mercy, Sherry, April, Angie, they all said that the sign, the Michael Jackson Auditorium, Gardner Auditorium, is still there. And someone just went recently, so they said his name is still there, so that's good to know at least. Oh wow. I can't tell you how happy we are to have finally gotten the chance to talk to you, Paul. Was there anything else that you wanted to share with us before I announce the contest? Or Tammy, was there anything else?
I don't
Wait
think
a
there's
minute.
anything.
Wait a minute. You met Michael, and I know you told your story during our history celebration, but there was something that you left out, I think. Wasn't there a story that you left out and you told me to remind you to share it today? Now I can't remember.
Yes. So I met Michael in '96 in Melbourne. I spent a week outside the hotel, and he would come down of a night time after the media had left and give out roses and pizza and meet everybody, the fans that were sleeping out the front, and shake our hands. He shook my hand, and I've got a photo of it somewhere. But yeah, and I forget what the story was that I forgot to tell you last time.
Let me see.
Was it of being in the elevator?
Oh, was it?
So I almost got in the elevator with him. So what happened was at the Hyatt Hotel in Melbourne. So he was staying in the top floor, the penthouse, and of course I was going into the hotel and trying to get in the elevator and going up, but the top 5 floors you needed a special key for. The public couldn't go up there, but so I went up to the top floor that I could go to, and then found my way into, I think it was a maid's quarters or something, and they had their own elevator that went up to the penthouse, which didn't need a key. So I was young, I was just inquisitive. So I snuck in there and got up to the penthouse and came out of the elevator, and Yannick, Michael's personal bodyguard, was sort of standing next to a room door and said, "Oh my God, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, I've just come to see Michael." He's like, "You can't be here." And he sort of come and ushered me to the other elevator so I could go. And Michael came out of this door with a couple of other people and started walking towards the elevator that Yannick was pushing me into. And so he pushed me into the elevator, and I went down to the ground level and came out, and it was roped off at the ground level. So I've just come out, and there's fans screaming everywhere. I'm walking through the middle going, oh. And then about 30 seconds later, Michael came out of the elevator right behind me. And I'm like, oh, I could have been in the elevator with him for 10 seconds. But once again, he said hello and said hello to all the fans, and off he went.
Oh, so close.
Yeah,
so close.
I can't imagine. So.
I just found our old.
When he'd come down at night time as well and meet everybody, that was closer. He'd come down and face to face like this, and thank you for your support, and like, you're the biggest pop star in the world. You don't need to thank us for your support. But he was very genuine.
Yes.
Always.
Very genuine, and I've got to say, when I shook his hand, I felt that same thing that a lot of other people have spoken about, warmth, where I don't know if it was just being a fan, but the warmth of his hand, and I felt really calm. You would think meeting Michael Jackson and shaking his hand, you'd be, but I felt calm and warmth, and that was something I won't ever forget.
Like you're saying, like an energy, some sort of warmth, and going through you.
Yeah.
Aura that everyone describes is
all the time.
So consistent. Yeah. That was it. I actually looked up our email, and that was the story that you wanted to share, the penthouse and the pizza. So that was it.
There's so many stories from that week. I think I told you about the one where he would get into his car and drive one block, and the fans would run after him. He'd open the door and go, "Come on, catch me if you can," and then go another block.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
He seemed to be so, even just knowing about him, and he was so welcoming to people, and he let people go to his Neverland Ranch and fans and go stay with him. I think there's some members in our club that have hung out with him, and it's just amazing, like what superstar at his level would just be so welcoming and trusting, very trusting, and giving and humble always, and just such a kind person. It's just that's good.
Yes, that's why we're here. That's why we're here as his fans.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess that is a nice place to end this. And but before we log off, I just wanted to tell everyone, and we made this announcement earlier this week, that Paul has graciously decided to give away 3 of his books to fans, and you'll have the chance to read and be immersed in all of Michael's charity work. And yes, there they are. We're going to post 3 questions for you to answer right after this ends, to be entered for a chance to win one of those 3 books. And this time we will announce the winners live during a live drawing, because that's what everyone was asking for. So we're going to ask 3 questions, but I'm going to actually give you a chance to answer one of them live. So it's kind of going to be a give me for you. So one of the questions was, and you can answer it in the chat, and this will kind of be a free question, I guess. In 1994, Michael and Lisa Marie Presley visited a children's hospital in Budapest, Hungary, where they met a young boy who was in desperate need of a new kidney. Michael not only paid for the kidney transplant, but also for medical treatment for the boy for 10 years. What was the name of the boy?
Wasn't that liver? It was a liver.
Oh,
it was a liver.
Was it a liver, Paul? Sorry.
I don't know now.
I'll go back.
But anyway, that's fine.
It was a liver.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you know the answer to that, you can put it in the chat, and that'll be the first answer to one of the questions, and then the other 2 we will post in the group, and then you message us, and then we will do a drawing for you. Yes, I think, yep, Tyra got it. Farkas, Angie got it, Farkas, and Mercy got the full name, Mercy Gallardo, Bella Farkas, yes. Yeah, you guys got it. So that's going to be kind of the style of questions that we'll ask, and then you'll have a chance to win. Yes, it was a liver. People are saying it was a liver. Yep. Great. You guys are on it. You guys are on top of it. That is excellent. Okay. All right. So with that being said, I just wanted to thank you, Paul, for taking the time to celebrate Michael's birthday in this way. We can celebrate his musical legacy forever, but this is just as important, his humanitarian side. And thank you. You're on the other side of the world from us. So thank you for waking up early this morning and joining us. And thank you guys in the chat, the book club members, for waking up early wherever you are. I heard someone in the chat is in India. Thank you for joining.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can ask you, Paul, though, before you leave, like what's just sort of in a nutshell, after studying him for 2 years and all, what do you want people to know? What would be, of course, he's a humanitarian, but what did you learn that was surprising that you just want people to know? Is there something you can sort of sum up that?
To me, it wasn't all surprising, but just that he was a human being, a decent human being, a generous, loving, angelic human being, and he did a lot of good. And don't read the garbage.
Burnt out.
Read this.
Yeah.
How would we get that, by the way? If other people want to order it, I know you're gonna be giving some away as prizes, but is this on Amazon, or is there a way that people can order your book if you autographed it, or do you have that ability, or not really? It's like through your own site, or?
Yeah, so through my site is humanitarianbook.com.
Okay.
And they can order from there. Again, because it comes from Australia, shipping is a little bit expensive, but if you want me to autograph it or write a message, I'm happy to. And so that's humanitarianbook.com. Otherwise, you can just get it from Amazon.
It's exciting to get an autographed copy from the author, right? So if you're willing to do that, that's great. So it's humanitarian.com.
Humanitarianbook.com.
Okay.
So, all right. So we'll put that in a message, because everyone in the very beginning of the chat, everyone was saying, "I want an autograph from Paul."
Yeah.
Autograph.
So do I. I want an autographed one.
Yeah. So they're probably going to get it from the site. But other than that, it is also available on Amazon, like you said. And
don't mind, Paul, as long as you don't mind the shipping and doing all that stuff. If that's
you just message me on Facebook. That's fine. Whatever.
Okay. All right. So before we come off, I just wanted to make a general announcement to everyone. Next Saturday, we'll be having our first Michael Jackson Insight Group study, or JIGS for short, JIGS, led and organized by book club member and moderator Emma Allen. We'll be taking a deep dive into Michael's very own autobiography, Moonwalk, his own story up until the 80s, at least, in his own words. Next Saturday, September 5th at 8 p.m. GMT. Check the announcements section of our page for more details. That, I think, in my opinion, Moonwalk is a really interesting book, but not for the reasons that you think. I think Michael, I think he wanted to, he put a lot into that book, but I would have loved to have seen like an updated version of his life later in life, like a, continuation of his life. But we have this. We know what he was doing, throughout his.
And Dancing the Dream as well. That's
Yeah.
a little bit of a continuation.
Yes, it is.
Excellent, I think. But
all right. So with all that being said, I think we lost Paul.
Sorry.
Oh,
Sorry.
good, you're back.
Sorry.
Oh, perfect. No, it was actually perfect timing, because we're actually at the end of our time and we're good to go. I think we got everything, all of our questions answered, and we have a contest, and and I think this is a great way to cap off Michael's birthday. So thank you all for joining us, everyone in the chat. And
thank you, Paul, for joining our book club and appearing tonight. And we really appreciate your work.
And thank you, ladies. You do an awesome job, and the group is great. And there's a lot of Michael Jackson groups out there, but this is a good one.
Thank you. Yeah,
it means a lot.
It does.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. All right, everyone.
Thanks.
Well, good night or good morning, wherever you are.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, Paul.
Morning.